up by what's expected. Joseph's brothers probably had the right idea after their dad's death to be afraid. Because they knew when dad's not around, we can turn on each other pretty quick. Because Joseph had gone out in his fancy robe to see his brothers. It was stupid of him because they didn't like him. He had to know that. And he went off flaunting around in the fancy robe that helped make them jealous. But Dad was home, not around to protect his favorite son. So his brothers, get rid of this guy. So, now that Jacob's dead, definitely not around anymore, they had taken him back to Canaan and buried him even. I think if I were one of those brothers, and my brother who I had tried to throw in a pit and devised to sell was now the governor and the one handing out food to people so they didn't starve, I might say, uh-oh. But here's the thing. Joseph didn't let the past dictate his actions. Through all the junk that had gone on before, Joseph was not bound by the patterns of the past. He was not bound by what's expected. He didn't have to do the same old thing. Instead of exacting his revenge or saying, look, Dad's gone, you can all go home now, I'm tired of you. Or worse, he was the governor after all. He decided to forgive them. He decided that a different path was possible. Though to say that he decided it might not quite be. Joseph himself recognizes that it's only through God's action that that different path was possible. Because Joseph maybe isn't the greatest exemplar. He was always showing off in front of his brothers. He was an arrogant 17-year-old. No offense to the teenagers in the room. But teenagers aren't always the humblest of folk, right? Adults aren't always the humblest of folk either. Joseph probably should have, put on regular shepherding clothes when he went out to find his brother instead of fancy robe. It's like wearing your prom dress to go to the grocery store. Wildly unnecessary. So the detail that's in the Hebrew, which is kind of weird, which is why it felt like I say fancy schmancy robe, because no one really knows the description of the robe, what it means. But it means something like long sleeves. Sleeves that cover your hand, because if your hands are covered up, you're not going to do much work. It wasn't a working robe. The youngest son isn't working. So Joseph probably didn't come to this great point of forgiveness on his own. God worked through the whole messy situation. God worked through Joseph almost being killed, worked through Joseph being sold into slavery, worked through Joseph being put in prison because he was framed for assaulting his master's wife, was brought into the Pharaoh's house, saved all sorts of people from a famine, and along the way, God was teaching him the humility that he severely lacked as a 17-year-old. He probably had even fancier robes now that he was in the Pharaoh's house. But he had been transformed by God's saving mercy. Even though he had the riches of the kingdom and all the food that the whole region had, which is probably better than robes or gold. I'd rather eat than have a stack of metal. He learned a different way. Through God's saving action, we have a different way too. Through the baptism that Carter is about to have, that we've shared, that Jesus shared too. In that unity, in these waters, new possibilities are coming into fruition. We don't have to repay evil with evil. We don't have to exact revenge on our enemies. We can respond in love. We can respond to being beaten down or persecuted with forgiveness and mercy. Like Joseph, our lives aren't so perfect or simple. Sometimes maybe we're more like his brothers, like we're sick of this, let's put it aside. Sometimes we're probably like Joseph, maybe bringing it on ourselves. The thing is, all of us sin. All of us. That's why we start our service with being forgiven right off the bat. Before we get to everything else, let's clean things up from the week before. Start anew again. Every day we get the chance to remember our baptism, whether it's taking a trip and being in the Jordan River itself, or just taking a shower or washing our hands. Those cleansing waters and God's promise that we are loved and forgiven. Take over the world. Take over whatever has happened, and we are born anew. Joseph's story is our story. Maybe not the details, but the pattern certainly is. Christ, each day, calls us to a new path and a new possibility that's etched and based in forgiveness. Forgiveness for our trespasses, the trespasses of our neighbors, and even our brothers.